Google has said that it is a ranking factor and does give you a slight ranking boost if you are utilizing HTTPS. It's a very negative thing if you're not utilizing it. Part 2, or Section 2 of the Web Almanac, is all about user experience. And Chapter 7 is about SEO. So I'm going to take a few more points and takeaways from this one to share with you, given that I'm kind of more interested in this subject matter. So a couple of neat data points. They found that 64% of pages utilize an H1, but 57% actually had text in them. So fairly low adoption for an H1 tag. Something that, has been debated over the years, how important it is for a site to actually, from an SEO standpoint, to have a keyword-rich H1 tag. I'm not going to suggest that it's going to be a game changer to do, but it's certainly a good idea. Google looks at the biggest and boldest title, typically the H1, on a page to help understand what that page is about. So if you're not utilizing an H1 on your site today, it's a pretty simple missed opportunity to go in and rectify and improve on your site. They found that 48% of pages utilize structured data. More than half of the web is not utilizing structured data to help search engines better understand their content. Now, very recently, it's been debated a lot about what kind of structured data Google actually cares about. Google has documentation about very specific types of structured data that they certainly do care about. Things like recipe structured data, products, reviews, FAQs. They definitely have solid documentation on the structured data they do care about. But there's so much more structured data than just those items identified in their documentation. And it's now very actively being debated if Google actually cares about that stuff. I have to think that having structured data to help search engines better understand their content in any form should be helpful in some way or another. Generally, my recommendation around structured data would be focus on the types that Google explicitly says, yes, we use these. Yes, these are helpful, mostly because they generate rich results. And then prioritize adding other structured data that can help search engines better understand your content, a little lower than maybe some other tasks in your SEO schedule, but definitely don't leave them out completely. They found that 99% of pages use a title tag. Great. The median character count of a title tag is around 38, so, fairly short. They found that 68% of pages use a meta description, which is much lower than I thought it would be. Your meta description essentially controls that snippet that appears in search results right below the title of your page. So it's a very important attribute to have filled out, even though a lot of the time Google will write their own based off of page content. Still good to have a solid, meaningful meta description. They also found that the median page has 20 images on it, which to me seems like a heck of a lot. Again, every time I think about any of these metrics, my mind goes back to speed, performance, and the core web vitals. And what do you need 20 images to communicate about your product or service, unless you're like a graphic designer or an interior designer or something where your product or service is very, very visual. I just feel like 20 images on a median page just seems like a lot. And from an accessibility side, they found that 11% of images didn't have alt attributes. Again, something that's helpful for accessibility and something that's also helpful for SEO and helping Google understand those images. So when it comes to some information around the core web vitals in SEO, of the websites in Canada, 31% of them scored good on the core web vitals assessment. So that's a good sign. About a third of sites are meeting that benchmark. Definitely a long way to go for the other 2/3. Good to see that Canada was about the middle of the pack for optimized core web vitals scores. HTTPS is something that's extremely important. Google has said that it is a ranking factor and does give you a slight ranking boost if you are utilizing HTTPS. It's a very negative thing if you're not utilizing it. Browsers like Chrome will flag your site as not safe. You won't get that little green lock that appears in the URL, the address bar on Safari on your phone, or Chrome or Firefox. You don't get that little trust icon. So It's interesting to see that about 77% of desktop pages and 73% of mobile pages have used HTTPS. That's up 10% year over year, but we got to see those numbers boosted up into the high 80s and 90s. It's just required in today's landscape. And then another last piece on SEO, usage of AMP. This is Google's HTML framework for having fast, super fast loading websites served through Google's cache. The Web Almanac found that less than 1% of sites have AMP alternatives, which seems so low to me, given that news sites today require that you have AMP in order to show up in Google's news carousels. That's changing, but in today's world, that is the case. So it seems like a super low number of AMP utilization across the web. I was a big fan of AMP when it originally came out and did utilize it some. I found that although the speed improvements are significant, there's a lot of conversion and branding issues that come with utilizing AMP. So I've backed away from it mostly. Where I still use it a lot today is on blogs. So I might not have an entire website have an AMP alternate, but most of the time this blog section of the site I still utilize AMP for. If you have any questions about any of the content that I covered today, any of the topics, any of the points, please feel free to reach out to me. Check out our website at burkedigitalfactory.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. Follow us on Twitter. Thank you so much. We'll see you again.